This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Heidi Ira, good morning, sir. How are you doing?
I'm good. Glad to be back in the Eastern time zone, not being up at the ass crack of dawn. So all is good.
Yep, exactly. All is good for you. All is not good for the Heat. Losing to the Kings. Look, we expected them to lose to the Warriors. But then, you were hoping that there'd be some better news in the rest of the road trip, but it just wasn't that way. Overall, it is, I'm not going to say panic time yet because it's a long-ass season, but I got to tell you, I'm really concerned.
They always walk a razor wire without an elite top-tier superstar. And they have to play as a team, and they have to do it right on both ends all the time. And when it's not in lockstep, which the Heat are known for, that's their reputation, it can go to utter crap. And the fact that Eric Spoelstra sat there after the game Saturday in Sacramento and said, we aren't playing as a team. Guys are trying to do it by themselves on both ends of the court. You can see how this could come apart in a hurry. That if you're not getting the best of Jimmy Butler, the best of Kyle Lowry, a team playing Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo on both ends, there's not a lot of wiggle room for this team. This is not a team that has the great player. Okay, I'll bail you out. I'll get you this win. We'll move on till tomorrow. And right now you're seeing that. This team is not cohesively doing what it absolutely has to do to win ball games.
All right, so I'm going to go somewhere where most people are, I guess, nervous to go to. On a consistent basis, I think Riley has done a marvelous job for over a quarter century. But one of the things that I feel bad for the man is that there are times where his hands kind of tied. And I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. His wallet's kind of tied. And so, I watch other teams that are willing to go to other extremes. And, you can go to that. That's an option to pay taxes, to go and trade for stars, to make some more moves. And, the PJ stuff, that's not a superstar, but that was a key person that you kind of needed. And all I hear is luxury tax. And I kind of feel bad for Spo, for Riley, for the front office that they've got to try to compete, but they've also always got to try to compete by staying under a threshold that they're not allowed to cross that others do. And when you go visit Golden State, you don't have a chance because their team is willing to cross thresholds that yours isn't. And, in baseball, this happens. There's a threshold that certain teams want to cross and others don't. And, it's kind of bothersome that you have a owner that he's not a Bruce Sherman, bro. This guy's got money. And, you're not willing to go to areas to make life a little easier for your exceptional general manager and your exceptional head coach. So to me, as a fan, I got to say it bothers me a little bit that the Arison family is only willing to go to extremes in very rare circumstances.
Except PJ Tucker had absolutely nothing to do with the luxury tax. He had everything to do with the hard cap. There's two different things. The luxury tax means you spend above, you pay an extra tax. The hard cap means you could not go over a certain threshold to make other moves. The Heat did not bring back, sorry for the double negative, PJ Tucker because of the luxury tax. They did it because they thought they could bring in a whale that would have put them into the luxury tax. I think what you could say, Big O, is this: the Heat misplayed their hand or misread the market. And again, whether
either way, whatever, you're not getting enough for Riley is what I'm saying.
Because Pat went big. And he went big or he was going to go home. So what happened was this. Just like you are trying to read the market on crypto, or we're reading the market on the Dow and the market, you don't know where the right spot, the sweet spot is. Maybe the Heat overstated Kevin Durant. Apparently they did. Maybe the Heat overstated their chances for Donovan Mitchell. Apparently they did. Maybe the Heat overstated the availability of John Collins. Apparently they did. Those moves were the reason they didn't go to the full mid-level, which hard caps you for PJ Tucker. Now, here's part 2 to this, Big O. However, because they got sentimental with Udonis Haslem, which they always do, the reason they're not in the luxury tax is because they haven't filled their 15th roster spot. Now, that's kind of crazy. We saw a perfect example yesterday when Rowe was not activated by the Dolphins because they felt they needed, according to the broadcast, more special teams help. In other words, there's a hard 53 you have to decide. Well, in basketball, you have a hard 15, but the Heat are only going with 14. The perfect example was on Saturday when Yurtseven was out with the ankle, when Dwayne Dedmon was out with the illness, and they have the roster spot to have another player. So God bless Udonis Haslem. But that's where they could have played Montrezl Harrell. That's where they could have played DeMarcus Cousins. That's where they could have played Markieff Morris. Instead, because of the luxury tax, they're going one-man light. And again, this goes back to what I said at the beginning today of our Acura of Pembroke Pines report is this. The line and the margin is so thin for the Miami Heat in this uber-competitive Eastern Conference that to leave yourself short on something because of the luxury tax, I do agree with you there. So it's interesting. You're saying that he left Andy Ellisberg and Pat Riley without a full availability of
it just seems to me like over the last couple of years we're playing this money game, and dude, we have one of the great minds of basketball running this team. We have one of the best coaches in the NBA. Period.
Let me interrupt you there. That's my point. My point is, I'm saying they're also hamstringing Dolphins.
I look at the Dolphins and they'll do anything it takes to win. The Panthers are doing anything it takes to win. Jorge Mas will do anything it takes to. That guy will try to add 5 DPs when they're only accepting 3.
Exactly, and go over the cap. And here's the deal. And that's why I say instead of hamstringing Pat Riley and Andy Ellisberg, Big O, I'm going to disagree with you and agree with you. They're hamstringing Eric Spoelstra, one of the great coaches of all time. A Hall of Famer, that when Eric Spoelstra looked at his bench on a Saturday and said, I need another big man, and his only option was to put in the 42-year-old team captain, who basically he's shown us in recent years he doesn't want to play because they didn't go into the luxury tax. Because Montrezl Harrell would have signed here. Markieff Morris would have signed here. Hell, I'm not a big fan. Dwight Howard would have signed here. And I will tell you this. Whether it's DeMarcus Cousins, Dwight Howard, Montrezl Harrell, or I'm going to throw a name that's going to blow your mind, or even Hassan Whiteside, for those 6 to 8 extra minutes instead of Udonis Haslem, that could have made the difference. Let's face it, Big O, it was a 1-point game with 6 minutes to go. That's where the luxury tax is hamstringing this team. It's crazy, Big O. It's like you saying, I'm going to try to save money, and sorry, Sean, and go without a producer. And you've done that before. It's hard, and it makes your show less good. Well, what happens with the Heat, by not having that 15th player, it makes them less good simply because of money. I fully agree with that. We saw that on Saturday. In a roster that has older players, that has some injury-prone players, that has developmental players who aren't ready, like Nikola Jovic at 19, not to go in with a full 15 just to save money, only to save money. That's a hard one. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's just it was rough, man. It was rough, and to lose to the Kings, and it was their first victory of the year, and it's just like, God bless, man. It just, wow. All right, so what's next? They've got Golden State again.
They not only have Golden State, they have Golden State coming off consecutive losses to Charlotte and Detroit. Do you think they'll be a little bit hungry coming in here on Tuesday? I mean, to me, I almost see that as another L. And then you have Sacramento coming in on Wednesday. Then you go to Indiana on Friday. Maybe you get it done right. But that's the thing. The Heat have to be cooking. And I like what the players have said because they're honest. Yes, we brought back most of the same players from last year. You mentioned PJ being the difference. But there's so many different roles. Bam is being cast as a featured scorer, really for the first time, Big O. Tyler Hero's being featured as a full-time starter, really for the first time. So you have a major change in how they're playing in the first unit, and it does not look good. Then you have no Victor Oladipo on the second unit, so you have no shot creation. The bench was awful on Saturday. Well, last season, you had the NBA. Think about this. You had the NBA sixth man of the year to always bail you out when he came off the bench. So what I think has happened this season is they threw everyone back in the cauldron for Halloween. They stirred it back up. But when you mix it up and you try to be something different, you run the risk. And right now, the cohesion is lacking. The starters are coming out awful at the beginning of games. There isn't a very good bench. It's got to be more than waiting on Victor Oladipo when Omer Yurtseven. And let's face it, Big O, at a certain point, you got to stop waiting on Victor Oladipo. Because at no time over the last 4 seasons has Victor Oladipo been a reliable and available presence.
That's the problem.
God bless him for what he's going through with his injuries and his rehab. But at a certain point, you can't play the Victor Oladipo waiting game. So you know what, Big O? I just told you on the standard roster the Heat are going with 14 instead of 15. But let's be honest. Udonis Haslem really doesn't play. Saturday was the exception. That's 13. Nikola Jovic is 19 years old and still in high school. That's 12. Victor Oladipo is never available. That's 11. And Dwayne Dedmon is playing like a guy who's 33 going on 53. That's where you're hamstringing your team with your limited options. That when Eric Spoelstra returns to that bench, there's just not a lot there.
And the worst part is now you're leading me to the point that they don't have a lot of assets to trade to try to really shock the roster and make some kind of a move at this point in time. And the Lowry thing has become a disaster, and his contract won't become sexy till next year, or at least the summer when it becomes an expiring contract going into the final.
You know what? It's interesting because I spoke here in our Acura Pembroke Pines reports about this during the preseason. And I had really felt they were trying to showcase Duncan Robinson, who had some very good moments during the preseason. But now that they're in this must-win situation in the very competitive Eastern Conference, we see how well Cleveland is playing, they can't afford that anymore. Duncan Robinson played 6 minutes all in the first half on Saturday. That's your trade asset. That's your sweet spot contract. Through the preseason, hey, look, this guy can shoot. This guy's putting the ball on the floor. This guy can help your team. You know, it's like that big wiggly sign outside of the used car lot. You know, come in, we got a great deal for you on a 96 Cutlass. And at the end of the day, Eric Spoelstra, because he has to play to win, you can't feature that. So you're right. Instead of showcasing Duncan Robinson, they're not playing Duncan Robinson. And Big O, if you say to yourself, wait a minute, if the 2 and 5 team is not playing this guy, why should I trade for this guy? That's a real problem now as well.
All right, what are you working on in the Sun Sentinel so folks can check you out?
You know, I just posted a story at sunsentinel.com. There was a play last week, and we mentioned this Friday in our Acura Pembroke Pines report, where Steph Curry just absolutely put Tyler Hero into the spin cycle. If you go to YouTube, you'll see the play. Crossed him over left between the legs, crossed him over right behind the back. And I just talked to Tyler, what's it like being part of a YouTube highlight? And Tyler was kind of interesting because he also said, but coach trusted me to be out there, that I was on the floor for a big moment in a 5-point game with 6 minutes left. And so, Big O, what we have to see now is, can we keep trusting Tyler Hero? Because you saw it again in the Sacramento game.
Well, I'm not with that one. You can't blame him for. That
was an unbelievable move.
Yeah, I know, but Steph Curry does this to everybody. So
I did it again last night.
I'm not doing that to Tyler, okay? I'm not doing it to Tyler.
Can you trust Tyler Hero defensively at winning time?
No, not yet. No, not at all. No,
will you be able to trust?
But it has nothing. But it has zero to do with that play. By the way, I'm just saying. Okay,
will you at any point during the 4-year, $130 million extension that kicks in next season be able to trust Tyler Hero?
I don't know. I don't know.
And if you can't, Big O, you talk about money being thrown to a guy who can't be in a crunch time. That's a concern. So I looked into that a little bit, and then I just looked into
Ira, and I hate to cut you off, but my problem with that is, you either have a defensive disposition or you don't, dude. That's just the way it is. You either can play defense or you want to play defense, and you see that right from the get-go with whoever it is. It's who they are. It's Caleb Martin. It's in his DNA to want to play defense. You don't have to teach him how to play defense. The guys that you're going to teach, they're already aggressive. You just got to teach them the technique part about it at this level. To me, if you're not already coming in aggressively as a I'm trying to remember who came in that wasn't a defensive player and all of a sudden became a defensive player with that kind of an attitude night in and night out. I don't know if
you can
I
improve. A
remember.
guy like Max Strus improved. A guy like Max Strus went from
He has the
liability
Nazi in
to
him.
acceptable.
But it's in him already. You know what I'm saying? There's a nasty streak in Strus because he wants to dunk on you.
Right.
Those kind of guys are the kind of guys that want to play defense because there's an aggressive nature to them. With Duncan or John Sunvold or the guy that went to Toronto and also was a 3-point shooter, P. Pacono.
Jason Capono.
Right, Capono. You know, those kind of guys, there isn't a defensive disposition in them. So you're never going to teach them to be that. And Tyler has always been like an offensive guy. He never came in with any kind of swag on defense. He didn't play defense in Kentucky. Bam Adebayo did. You know what I'm saying? So to me, that's kind of the nature I see in players. If it's not already in their DNA, I don't know if you're really going to develop it in them.
Wow, at $130 million price point, that's going to be an interesting story down the road. So I wrote about that Steph play. Steph comes back in tomorrow. Not a good spot for the Heat. And we'll discuss that game on Wednesday in our RedRecover.com Inside the Paint show with Kurt Heelan. But yeah, with the sort of 2-5, maybe looking at 2-6. You don't want to get the Warriors after consecutive losses. That's where they're getting them.
The Edwards kid that they got back in the expansion years from DePaul. What's his name?
Kevin Edwards, the guard
Kevin
they drafted,
Edwards.
right, first season, yeah.
Right. He had a defensive disposition in him, but he was more, he had a lot of athleticism, but he was still raw offensively, and that was the part you were developing. But you knew he wanted to play defense. You know what I mean? Keith Askins, you had to develop his offense, but you knew naturally he wanted to play defense.
But you need to score also. But you need to score also. And if you're playing a Caleb Martin in your starting lineup, that's where you need the yin and the yang of having the scoring there also.
Amen. I just don't know if it's ever going to be in him. I'm trying to think of the offensive player that came into the league and then developed himself into being a good defender and a natural defender. I can't. I'm brain farting right now, trying to think of a finesse player that somebody turned into a good defender. I can't think of one right now, but I don't know. Can you?
Well, Klay Thompson was a little bit of that. He came in as a scorer. He's become a really, really good defender. So maybe you have a guy like that who had an offensive disposition first.
Yeah, it's funny because his dad was, a defensive player too.
Right. So maybe it wasn't the DNA to start with. You're right.
Yeah. Follow him on Twitter at Ira Heatbeat and catch his exceptional. Please subscribe to the South Florida Sun Sentinel and support all our local journalists who do an excellent job. Ira, as always, we'll see you on Wednesday for the
RedRecover.com Inside the Paint at 9 and catch you in our Acura Pembroke Pines report coming up on Friday. Thanks, Big O.
Thank you, Ira. Appreciate you. There you go. Oh, that is our Acura Pembroke Pines Miami Heat and NBA reports.